Rajesh Kumar, Performance Marketing Lead at Jubilant Food. And we have Ankit Grover, Business Head for Digital Native, OTT and Retail at InMobi. And as it always happens, the least knowledgeable person on the panel is made the moderator or the host. And that's true today as well. I'll be moderating today's session. My name is Nimesh Mathur, and I lead the customer success at Branch Metrics for the APAC region. Before we move forward, I want to give you a little bit of history of the mobile growth events. We have done these events across 50 plus cities across the globe in the past. And the fact that pandemic hit us earlier this year, we decided to do these events in an online mode since March 2020. And the goal for these events is to bring in the experts to share insights and how to succeed in the mobile ecosystem. So you'll hear from us from mobile acquisition and retention to deep linking and analytics. Essentially, we focus on topics that our mobile growth community cares the most about. Now, we will talk about the two sponsors for the event. The first sponsor is Branch Metrics, which is world's leading mobile linking platform with solutions that unify user experience and measurement across different devices, platforms, and channels. As you see on the slide, over 60,000 of the world apps run Branch throughout their product and marketing stack. Our co-partner for today's event is InMobi, which is world's leading marketing cloud. They help brands across the globe to understand, identify, engage, and acquire consumers through their mobile data and technology platform. All right, now that we have learned about the mobile growth event, we have learned about the sponsors of the event. I have briefly introduced the panel. Let's move to the next stage, which is to talk to panels in detail about their background, which companies they work for, and something interesting around what's not on the LinkedIn. So I would like to invite Ishan to talk about the things that we discussed. Tell us something that is not on your LinkedIn profile. Tell us something about the company that you currently work at, and also about an app where you have spent more time than you expected in 2020.
Right. Thank you so much, Nimesh, first of all, for having me over here. So, yeah, hello, everyone. As Nimesh said, I'm Ishan. I'm handling the marketing, sales, and PR for KreditBee, which happens to be India's largest fintech lending platform for young professionals. With respect to things about myself beyond LinkedIn, so I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. So whatever I feel is required to be shared, I usually put it up very, very actively. But nonetheless, yep. So essentially, being a part of this fintech ecosystem for over 5 years, we used to provide college, loans to college students at KreditBee for the first couple of years. So over there, I was primarily running the field sales ops management, and then once KreditBee started, we started focusing majorly on digital acquisition and loan origination and underwriting. So over there, my role primarily has been on the acquisition, digital acquisition side. Beyond my work, I love public speaking. Have been a part of quite a few panels, quite a few forums like TEDx, ID Bombay Lit Fest, and stuff like that. And happy and excited to be here. And with respect to the app, where I spent more time than I expected, so I don't know if it's a really out of the box. It's not really an out of the box app, but I spent a lot of time on YouTube, which I wouldn't do otherwise, because essentially like during COVID, I had more time than otherwise. So I used to kind of go through certain videos here and there. So I think not a very creative answer, but that's the truth.
Awesome. Welcome again, Ishan. Thank you so much for joining.
Sure.
Rajesh, we'll go next with you.
Yeah. Hi. So yes, I think So I currently I'm working with Jubilant FoodWorks as performance marketing lead, and it's been like 2 years I have been with the organization. And in total I have about like 8 years of experience into digital marketing. I work with startups starting like with Shopclues, GoIvivo, EasyMall, and now with Jubilant FoodWorks. Right. So I think during this COVID, I would say again most of the time I would say like I have spent on couple of the platforms, like same as like what Ishan said. Yeah, I think YouTube and everything was like sitting at home was very boring time, I would say. That's when I'd be like browsing a lot of videos videos, technology and stuff. News on YouTube, and I think, and then I think I would say like Hotstar, when like IPL and everything, following up the sports and everything. So yes, I think these two platforms, I would say, when I have spent like most of the time during this COVID. Yeah, and in my leisure time, I think I prefer to I love reading, and yeah, I watch like some suspense movies and stuff. So yeah, I think that's all about me. Yeah.
That's great. Welcome again, Rajesh. Thank you. Ankit?
Thanks, Nimesh. Hi, I'm Ankit. I had two verticals at InMobi, which is e-commerce slash retail slash OTT slash media, BFSI slash fintech slash RMG gaming, and all those landscape, right? So anything which involves some kind of device ID or digital native element is where I take care of those and those verticals. And yes, the traditional mapping of that in the offline world, which is retail, media, and others, comes part of this this vertical, right? And before InMobi, I was part with Vizuri, where I was heading the India and Middle East Africa zone for them. And before Vizuri, I was with Google for around 2.5 years, where I was part of the SMB marketing team, taking care of the growing the long tail agency ecosystem for them, right? And few things that you won't find on LinkedIn, and which turned out things for us as I became dad this year, right? So proud dad of a 6 months old baby and 3-year-old Labrador. So most of the time, I think, on the whole COVID has gone on discovering things for him and trying to be an so-called better parent in some form, right? So First Cry and other apps has been the most where the time has spent, right? So yeah, that's pretty much about me.
That's really cool, Ankit. First of all, congratulations on being
Thank
the
you.
dad, and thank you so much for joining us for today's session. Now, getting on to the questions for the session, and we cannot start a panel discussion in 2020 without using the words like unprecedented and pandemic. And very related to that is the aspect of consumer sentiment. Now, for each of you in your own industry, are there any major shifts on the consumer sentiment side that you have observed this year? And do you expect that to continue as we enter 2021 as well?
Right. So I think if I have to specifically talk about fintech lending as a sector or as a micro sector, so one thing that happened majorly post COVID is that people became very, very conservative with respect to their spends overall, right? So essentially, and especially to the TG to whom we serve, which is slightly mid tier and lower tier segment. So essentially, for them, having money in the hand became quintessential, which meant that they were not spending as much as they were earlier, right? So what it meant for us is that the lending use cases have seen a tectonic shift, right? So earlier we would see a lot of loans. The personal loan in itself, the end utility would be a lot more discretionary or a want-based sort of a proposition where people would want to, let's say, invest in businesses, and people would want to kind of do something that is not exactly a necessity, right? Essentially like planning travels and stuff like that. Of course, there was a portfolio of loans that went into need-based or necessity-based loans, but there was a large portfolio of loans that were discretionary, right? But post-COVID, what has happened is most of the loans that are going are need-based. People are not really borrowing money, or people are not taking loans for their wants and desires. So essentially that is one thing that has changed. So even though the overall loan taking behavior has still remained the same, the reason for the end use case of loan has changed, which essentially means that our communication strategy, the way we are targeting the consumers and everything, that has seen a major change. So that's one thing I would say has been a major shift that we see in 2020 versus 2019.
That's great. And I'm assuming that the entire story around moratorium would have also contributed to change in sentiment.
Yeah, I think so. Well, when the moratorium was announced, so I think it was more of a issue of, or more of the biggest challenge over there was consumer information, or rather consumer education, because when the news came out that, okay, there's a moratorium, a lot of people by default assumed it to be a loan holiday forever, right? So they thought that hamara loan maaf ho gaya. So now for entities that had an exposure in the market, we had to make sure that we reach out to the consumers and educate them correctly. That it was not about getting the money from them, because we all had to be sensitive to our consumers, because it was a time where everyone had to look out for each other. But the idea was to make them cognizant of the fact that it's not a loan holiday forever, and if you repay now, what are the benefits you have versus if you repay later, and essentially give them the right information and let them take a discretionary choice as to whether they would want to pay it right now if they can, or whether they would want to pay later, right? Because essentially there was a component of interest on interest which had to be paid if they availed the moratorium, right? So that education became extremely important. So that was one of the key tenets of consumer experience that we focused on. Instead of going all out and asking people to repay, we made sure that we take an educational path where we help them understand the pros and cons and let them take a more uniform and informed call rather.
That makes a lot of sense. And Rajesh, I'm assuming with Jubilant Foods in the food space with brands like Domino's and Dunkin' Donuts, you too would have seen a considerable shift on the customer sentiment side, let's say between April, May, June kind of a time frame versus October, November kind of time frame.
Absolutely, there has been a very significant change in the way the people were ordering food earlier. See, during this when this lockdown started, our operations were shut for almost 2 weeks, right? And our dining is a big contributor in terms of sales, right? And then when during this lockdown, our all the restaurants were shut. So yes, there was very big drop in the sales. But again, since we realized that digital obviously is going to play a role when the deliveries at least was allowed. That's when the kind of we started coping up, and the first challenge that we had was how do we kind of gain the trust from the consumers in terms of safety. How do we feel safe while ordering the food, right? That was the big question to all of us. So that's when we introduced the zero contact delivery, and we were the first one in the food space who kind of introduced zero contact delivery, and this actually and gradually our entire marketing communication completely changed. The entire strategy changed from a product offering to to shift the communication shifted to actually the safety, complete safety, right? So we were kind of talking about, I'm sure a lot of consumers would have seen a lot of videos in the market talking about just the how do we ensure the safety of food in the commissary, in the restaurants. How do we actually when we prepare the pizza in the restaurants, how do we ensure the safety of consumers, right? So all these, there were multiple 4-5 different videos, and that we kind of came up with, and then we marketed to consumers, and then that's when we started seeing the recovery in sales. And obviously, since the the entire shift happened and the entire consumer shifted to digital platforms, and we saw very we saw the customers who were very much comfortable ordering from through a dining channel. We saw the shift happening to digital platforms. So a lot of people who were not very much comfortable ordering through our mobile app or our mobile site, we saw that a lot of consumers started shifting to our digital assets. And that's when I think if I compare it last year to and December to, not December, last year October or November to this year, we have seen a drastic shift. Our dine-in business obviously is still not has not recovered very well, but yeah, in terms of ordering, it has we have almost gained 100%. So obviously we have seen a very significant shift in the ordering behavior from consumers. During this COVID, we have also worked on on obviously this was a big challenge for us. How do we cope up with the consumers' expectations, right? Our product. So we during this COVID, we worked on our product as well, product development. We made sure that we provide a smooth consumer experience while user are ordering through mobile app or a mobile site, right? So all these we during the 2-3 months initially, like April, May, June, we worked hard on it, just improving the consumer experience. And yeah, I think that has helped us to kind of recover the sales overall. And we are hoping that I think it's not going to be similar to demonetization when this certain surge happened in online transaction and then it dropped. But I feel that this behavior that has kind of has changed this this due to this COVID, this will remain, I believe, even post everything goes normal. So yeah, I think that's
a very insightful answer, Rajesh. And as an end user of your app myself, I can resonate with a lot of things that didn't strike me when I was using it, but now when you say it, It looks like it's a very planned strategy that has worked really well for you to recover over the last few months.
Absolutely,
Great.
yes. So yeah.
Thanks. Ankit, I know you will have a much broader perspective given that you work across industry with various domains and industries. What is your observation, between H1 and H2 with respect to
Sure, absolutely, right. So I think being a part of APAC, right, so we were the early markets who actually faced the heat, right? So we were the first one to get hit, right? If you look at the global side, right? And we never imagined in our, nobody even imagined that will undergo such a strict lockdown, right, as compared to other markets, right? So the way I look at it is defining or dividing into three different blocks, right? So sometime late Q2, early Q3, right? And how did these things change sometime in May, June, and the post-June things, right? And especially when you sit at the epicenter, where you get to see the businesses across categories, right? And you can never imagine like Amazon, Flipkart being shut, right? Sometime in March end or beginning of April, and suddenly, and sometime in as we progressed in April, May or somewhere, we started seeing Amazon going back to being the online bookshop, right? From where it started almost 25 years ago, right? And Nika trying to convince all the users that, hey, beauty is a part of essentials, right? Big Basket trying to fight the battle, making sure they can deliver on time. You can actually have to book the queue, right, in Big Basket to order things. At the same time, in fintech, the whole fintech, as Ishan also said, right, was again, there was a lot of issue in the money rotation. There was a moratorium thing, which again impacted the fintech industry. Also, there were a lot of negative sentiments. The income of households were going down. There was negative sentiments, which again created a lot of heat in the fintech vertical as well. At the same time, we saw a massive impact coming from RMG gaming, right? So gaming was one of the most and who got benefit after it, right? So it's almost saw a 135% increase in users in the real money gaming ecosystem, right? OTT became in one of the most the leading ones, right, in some form, right? Both AWOD and SWOD, right? And that became in much more this part, right? And when you look at the post June, right, and the two things happened, right? So basically, the household income got better. The sentiments got better, right? Now users were little okay in spending now. And then you had a golden triangle is what we call, right? Now you just imagine you have users, consumers sitting at home, celebrating all the festives starting from August till December, right? So it's the line of festive that you get from August to December with better household income, with better positive sentiments. Cricket coming back after a long time, right? Then which is we all know how cricket is for India. And the fourth is now, because of the positive sentiments, people are okay in shopping, right? Things changed in the S2, right? Across verticals, right? Everybody was packed, right? Starting from e-commerce, starting from food delivery apps, everybody started going up and up, right? Now, again, you zoom it out in before H2, right? Where we had a little bit of transition phase. A lot of advertisers were trying to play a different role, right? So maybe an example of Flipkart, right? So Flipkart was trying to engage with their users with maybe Flipkart videos or games. The whole communication around or touch point with the customers were more on different non-shopping aspects, right? Similarly with Dhani, right? So Dhani, which is also a fintech app, right? They just wanted to make sure they want to get into more of, they started getting the Dhani games, Dhani doctor. They're trying to diversify things, making sure the users who come in their apps still have something to look after it instead of uninstalling the app. Right? So yeah, that's the massive trend that we saw, which is again gonna carry on 2021 as well, right? So yeah, so that's a few massive difference that we saw. Festive season almost changed things for most of the verticals in India.
No, absolutely. And those are very interesting data points, Ankit. And one thing which I want to double click on there, you talked about OTT. Now, OTT combined with 5G's introduction and with the overall boom around OTT consumption, the massive boom in internet-enabled devices like your CTVs, smart TVs coming in. In 2021, do you see increased focus of brands around OTT advertising? And we can probably have your viewpoint first, followed by how Shan and Rajesh sees it
No,
for their brand.
absolutely bang on, right? So look at this way, right? So in fact, Mr. Ambani announced almost a week back in the IMC, and that the 5G is getting launched in H2, right? In fact, it will be pretty much launched in the pilot phase in sometime in Q2 in India, and which again going to be the major focus is going to come on the H2 of this part, right? And just imagine 5G coupled with Wi-Fi 6, right? Which Wi-Fi 6 again changed the game in US, right? Which we started seeing in India as well, right? It's gonna change the entire. Just imagine, right? What happened 4 years back when Jio launched 4G. And by the way, if you look at OT advertising in India, right, it pretty much matches with the Jio style, right? OTT video advertising almost started in H2 in 2016, and that is the time when Jio actually started in India, right? And now we all know how the OTT advertising is pretty much exploding, right? 30% of the programmatic video advertising is of the comprises of OTT, right? Award has grown almost 135%, right, in this pandemic time, right, when most of the brands have started spending on OTT on the award ecosystem, right? We have started seeing a shift, like most of the large brands, right, who believe that users generally don't engage with the ads and they just almost cancel or doesn't click on ads. Is they've started working with some kind of SWOT way of some kind of brand creation, right? Which we saw in a couple of maybe Yum brands, what they did with Amazon Prime Video, or maybe a Mahindra Thar that they did with Z5, right? So there's a new wave that's going to happen, right? And it's going to explode and going to continue in 2021. And just imagine now you have 5G, and with the Wi-Fi 6, right, with an OTT advertising, it becomes the way that OTT did, or maybe 4 years back. In fact, if you look at in the NA, in the US market, when Netflix was launched, right, they hadn't had any competition with the straight 6 years. And after 6 years is where they started getting heat from the other OTT players. Right? The OTT is not more a niche segment, right? It's more a mass play now, right? Even in India, you have around 25-30 OTT platforms growing significantly high, both on AWOD and SWOT. And in fact, and in fact, we can see, and some of the performance advertising monies are also going in OTT advertising now, right? So brands are okay spending a little extra, right, with some kind of making sure they get high LTV users, high loyal users, right? Because at the end of the day, the loyal users are actually watching content on OTT platforms, right? And this is where we started seeing a lot of combination of user acquisition and remarketing. But the whole catch over here is you have to define the right user segments, right? And chase those set of users with the proper way of targeting, right? Or else you will end up burning, right? But yes, the focus will be on OTT advertising in 2021, what we see also in 2022. Maybe Ishan, Rajesh, you should share your thoughts on how have you explored OTT advertising.
Right. I think very interesting points mentioned by Ankit, and specifically, I would want to highlight the point he mentioned on the performance marketing side. So one thing probably we have to understand is that the major chunk of advertising. Share of the pie that OTT will eat into is the television, the erstwhile television, because that's where people used to view a lot of, live or even pre-recorded video content, whether it's in, form of movies or serials or, even the live matches and stuff like that. So there's a movement that's happening from, the hardcore television audience towards, the audience that views content on OTT platforms, right? So now the beauty of advertising on OTT versus on television for once is that there is a very clear call to action that you can define on the OTT platforms, right? So at the end of any television ad, you can't really ask the person to, explicitly go to a particular app or, do something as such. But in OTT platforms, you can define it. It doesn't necessarily have to be have to be driven by a landing page. Sometimes it just could be a video view in itself, but you can define that in a more proactive way. So that is one advantage. Second is the measurement and tracking is a lot more on point compared to television, right? So on in the television's case, it's TRP or reach oriented, which is not exactly a clear indicative of the kind of reach and engagement that and for that matter even the business, the lifetime value part that Ankit talked about. So how much of contribution is coming from a television advertisement is not something that you can define or calculate to the hilt with 100% confidence, right? Whereas when it comes to an OTT driven advertisement, things are a lot more traceable, a lot more defined. We have entities like Branch that are helping in attribution as well. So essentially all this helps OTT advertising. And yes, I think people are switching, with smartphones, with smart TVs, people mostly being on the go. Most of the content is being viewed over there, and hence I feel this is where the overall advertising is moving as well. And yes, I think both on the performance and brand side, we will see a lot more advertising dollars kind of being put into the OTT marketing piece as well.
Great. Rajesh, do you think this will be very useful in your business as well? I personally think that it will be, given the upcoming festivals and the fact that when people are at home, their tendency to order food and rely on television as a source for advertising increases. Did you see that as an active channel in the months to come?
Yes, so we have seen a very drastic change in a media strategy in last 7-8 months, right? Before this COVID, obviously we are a brand who is always on air on TV, like you always see some ads running, right? But we never had a clear digital strategy when it comes to branding, right? So but yes, since during this COVID, the complete that when people were spending more time on the OTT platforms, right, browsing, be it Hotstar, YouTube, on everything, right, all these OTT platforms, right. So obviously we shifted our media strategy, same way, right. We were kind of we had zero investment on TV for almost like 3-4 months during this COVID, right, and that's when but yes, we were very much focused on OTT platforms. Our marketing strategy, our communication was very much clear on OTT platform. We were present on Hotstar, other platforms, wherever we, and these platforms helped us to reach actually the right consumers for us, because OTT platforms and the food, right, these are a very good combination, right. Especially, and obviously this IPL was obviously certainly pushed to later in the year, but again earlier, before this year, I would say our media strategy on OTT platform was only limited to IPL season, because that's when we used to see a very drastic surge of users on Hotstar, right. And the IPL sports has a very good combination. It's a big it gives us a opportunity to tap in the users. So that's when we were kind of using the OTT platforms. But yes, I think post COVID, since the complete shift happened, when user was present on OTT platforms, then yes, we also changed our media strategy. And in the coming years, I feel that obviously there is still long way to go on OTT platforms right now, because I when I look at it, I want to look at it beyond the reach and frequency on OTT platforms, right, from a performance perspective, right. How right now I think there is still a long way to explore, and the product is yet to be kind of developed. Smarter way to to remarket, right, all of that. So I think that is yet to open up, and I feel yes, there is obviously a long opportunity ahead in the coming years for OTT platforms for the brands, and especially I'm waiting for Netflix to open up for marketing.
No, absolutely.
While we are at this topic, I see a question in the chat window that what do you consider when you advertise on OTT, brand awareness or performance? So maybe I'll add my couple of cents, and then probably Rajesh and Ankit can add their thoughts, since we are at this topic itself. So if I have to speak as an advertiser, see, one thing we have to understand is that when you talk about OTT platforms, it's a very high engagement involvement that the user has with the content. Let's talk about IPL, right? Or let's talk about any live streaming sport app, or even let's say watching a movie on Netflix or Amazon Prime, Hotstar, whatever's out there. So now as a user, as a consumer, or as a person who's just viewing the content, I would see all these advertisements as speed breakers to my viewing experience, right? So that's one thing all the advertisers have to be aware of very well while they are thinking of putting out any kind of ad over there. And again, there are different formats in which advertisements can happen. So it could be a pre-roll or a mid-roll, which is a video ad that pops in either at the beginning of the content or in middle of the content, and then it could be a banner ad or an interstitial when you are just scrolling through the app, right? So essentially, in my experience, I would say brand works slightly better than performance. I mean, as of now, when we kind of do these kind of small experiments, we see that on the performance side, the cost of acquisition, if you compare it with with the other channels, like let's say InMobi, when we are running like affiliate marketing, so the cost of acquisition is slightly on the higher side when you talk about OTT ads in general, is what I've seen. Having said that, we shouldn't purely look at it through the lens of a performance, but also look at it from the brand marketing standpoint. And even on the performance side, we shouldn't just look at the the outright CAC, but also the kind of assist that this kind of a channel provides. Because essentially, as I said, it's a high involvement channel, and if you're able to catch the attention of the user, so there were certain very creative ads that we saw during IPL from across brands. Like Cred had a campaign going on, and then we had a couple of other brands that were doing some really nice campaigns, right? So essentially, with all this, it it generates a word of mouth, and essentially it would affect your impact, your performance later at a certain stage. So you should look at it as an assist channel in performance rather than a channel that will drive your installs or bottom of the funnel conversions. But if I generally have to compare, I think for me, brand would have a slight more precedence over performance when I look at OTT channels. Probably, as I said, Rajesh and Ankit can add in their thoughts as well.
I agree with you, Shan. So yes, I think so far, again, branding gets the OTT works well, right? But when you start measuring like direct attributable, sales or orders, right, and the performance, then that's when you see like your cost per acquisition is like 2-3x of what you get from different other channels, right? So obviously for performance, it is, I mean, I would not, it's not right now cost effective, but yes, when you look at it beyond the like reach and frequency, we like measured like how does it impact the purchase intent of consumers who has viewed the ad, right? So that way it does help you to kind of push users to a lower funnel. But yes, again, you will have to kind of remarket those users again and then get them back on your platform. But yes, direct attributable performance is something, I think that's something that is not some right now very good, and it's not, I would say, like in the favorable, I would say right now. Yeah.
Right. So I have a little different opinion here, right? So what we have done at InMobi, right? So OTT has become one of our major categories, part of InMobi Exchange, right? So typically InMobi Exchange, the inventory that we hold, the SDK inventory, right, which is non-affiliate, the InMobi Exchange inventory, right, typically consists of gaming / OTT / utility / name, news / little bit of social, right? And over the period of time, especially in 2020, we saw a fragmented demand and fill rate happening in the OTT as a space, right? And yes, I agree, in most of the advertisers, when they try to run directly in this part, they generally point because eCPMs are too high for a video inventory, especially in OTT, especially in the time when OTT as a channel is on demand, right? And the way that we look at is and when I say key performance is where we generally see, right, when we using DSP, right, and when you, instead of chasing, just imagine, right, instead of chasing everybody in Z5 or in Woot or any of the OTT or in a single view, right, just imagine that out of the 50 users that you see on the particular slot, that, hey, these are the 5 users who might be interested on Footek, or 5 users who might be interested in Domino's, right? So what the platform does, it allows to reach only 5 users, right? And that narrows down your eCPIs, eCPX, and ECP, the double funnel metrics, right? So what definitely it happens, eCPI is a way little higher as compared to what you see in the API world, which is the affiliate world. But what definitely gets better in the funnel structure, right, which is your from installs to app open to PDP to add to cart to whatever you thank you, whatever your end event is, right? That definitely is much better, right? That's where these are the few platforms, not only limited to OTT, right, but gaming / OTT is the third new wave that we also saw in 2020 is the UGC, right, the social, right, beyond Facebook, Insta. TikTok had already created and the UGC wave across the globe, and then TikTok banned in India. Then players like Roposo, which is part of InMobi and others, came into play, and now UGC also enacting as in where the user is spending a large amount of time, right? So the whole the backbone of running performance is using a reliable DSP and chasing the right set of users and making sure they convert, right? If that how it is, it still becomes the performance channel. Right. So.
Great. Thanks for a very detailed answer, guys, on everything OTT related. Taking a little bit of tangent because Ishan touched about the lifetime value of a customer as well. Now, if you think about the typical app customers versus non-app customers debate, I want to understand what are some of the strategies that you guys are implementing to drive the app adoption as well as app acquisition in your respective companies.
Right. So I think, see, one thing again, which brings back, the whole COVID scenario, which hit us earlier this year, is that, first of all, retention of users has become way more important because one thing that we see is that people are now trusting. I mean, the trust value or the credibility on brands is playing a role that is larger than ever, whether it's offline experience or online experience, right? Essentially, of course, people are moving more digital than non-digital, but even within that, people are willing to interact and willing to engage with brands which they trust more than ever, right? So retention for that matter becomes very, very key. So that is one thing for sure. The strategies that we are deploying again. So when we talk about retention, we are looking beyond usual SMSs and OBDs and emails and push notifications. Of course, they remain a key part of our ORM strategy, but we are kind of experimenting with stuff like app inbox and in-app notifications, where the idea is that once the person is on the app, we are trying to identify various ways to communicate to the users things we want to communicate, or essentially try to make that experience more customized and personalized by trying to identify what the user specifically wants and then try to kind of curate the entire user journey accordingly, so that they get that offline personalized experience that they would generally get in an offline store in the app itself. So that's one thing that we are kind of trying to do at our end. The other thing which interestingly, of course, we are still in the early stages of experimenting with that, is to try to see different kind of customized product flows depending on the kind of cohort that we are onboarding at the acquisition end, right? So it can get a little tricky because essentially we have to identify very well that okay, this is the kind of product flow that's going to make more sense for a particular kind of user at the very beginning. So those kind of experiments, we are running a lot of ABs around it, but essentially the idea is to instead of keep a single product flow right from the registration till the loan disbursement for everyone, we try to understand from the user that who they are and what are the different parameters that define them in a better way, and then give them a product flow accordingly. Just to give an example, so let's say if we get a salaried customer, so we are able to identify the salary details of the customer, and we identify that okay, this is a person who falls in a certain salary bracket. Then we try to curate a journey within the product for them that is more customized towards our personal loan for salaried or our premium personal loans, right? Versus let's say we identify somebody who's self-employed and in a slightly lower income range, right? So essentially our product flow would kind of push them towards the product which is more customized or more relevant to them. So things like that are being experimented. So I think these are a couple of things we are doing at our end to ensure that not just at the acquisition side, but also in customer retention, customer re-engagement side, we are customizing and we are personalizing the experience of users on our platform.
Great. Rajesh, you want to add something on the not just
Yes.
the app versus non-app, but the way Ishan blended the user experience and personalization aspect to it? How do you see those three tying together?
Yes, so absolutely. So user experience is very critical, obviously, in the service industry, right? And as I mentioned earlier, like during this COVID, with like experience of consumers is something that is everything for a brand right now, right? And and we also feel that obviously that's that for a brand, obviously the acquisition, when you do acquisition, obviously whatever the spend that we do to acquire a customer, right? But retaining a customer is a very big challenge for all the brands, and similarly we face the same issue, right? And that is the reason that we have kind of, so our, for last 6 to 8 months, there have been a lot of development in the, app, the way and the features that we had earlier in the Domino's app, right? So, recently we have, like, now earlier there were just the two options. So you can order either a delivery or a takeaway, right? So now we have, like, introduced dine-in as a channel as well. So you can place a dine-in order in the app itself, right? Then we've recently launched a drive-through, pick and drive. So you order from your app, from the app itself, and you don't have to go to the restaurant. You can just, there's a parking area which you can select yourself in the app itself, and you can just go there and stand, and this pizza will be delivered and in your car or bike, wherever, in the parking area. So, right, so there are 3-4 different features that we have come up with, and these are again a strategy for how do we to increase the retention of the consumers, right? And obviously we keep analyzing, and for app and non-app, I would say, like, from that perspective, so yes, app is very critical reason, because we in the Domino's, in our business, so we look at, the customer orders frequency. That's a very important metric for us, and we've seen that the users who uses mobile app has a much higher frequency than any other channel, be it like dine-in, be it mobile site or desktop, right? So yes, app becomes a very important channel for us, and that's been, like, we have been focusing acquiring and customers and retaining as well. So, like, that's the reason that we, like, for last 6 or 8 months, if I look at it, our active base has grown like 60-70%. So yes, and the retention, with all these new developments in the product and the feature as well, we have been able to kind of even reduce the churn rate as well. And since we have also started launching different exclusive products within the app. So these initiatives have helped us to kind of reduce the churn rate overall, and obviously it increases the lifetime value of the consumers as well.
Absolutely. Ankit, any interesting trends that you are seeing across your customers from an app adoption standpoint?
One of the new wave that we saw, it's in fact not a new wave, right? But actually it started getting into magnitude, not only from the India market, but also in Southeast Asia market, right? So one of the things that every brand is trying to do is get all your users back, right? Who were shopping with them or engaging with them in the before pandemic, right? How do we get them back, right? And that is where the re-engagement, making sure remarketing has become a one more critical element with the user acquisition, right? But there's a new trend that we are seeing and happening on the personalization angle, right? So it's going beyond the first party data, right? As basically now it's no more that I saw a Nike shoe in Myntra app and I got dropped out. I get to see exactly the same Nike shoe with recommended options, right? That's an old way of doing remarketing, right? So new trend is where the brands are mixing the 1P data with the 2P and 3P, right? So just give you an example. Maybe I am a user who might not be an high LTV user for Domino's Pizza, but I'm a user who spends a lot on Swiggy ordering Domino's pizzas through a Swiggy app, right? So how do we use that 2P, 3P data? I don't know about this user, and that's the reason Rajesh never targets me, right? Because I'm a very low LTV user, but in reality, I'm in high LTV users, right? And the only way that Rajesh or Domino's can know is when they couple the 1P data with the 2P and 3P data, right? So that's where the new wave is what we are seeing, right? And the new form of remarketing or reaching or re-engaging or whatever you call it, bringing back the users back with some kind of 1P coupled with the 2P, 3P data, right? As is where the next wave is going to be. Yeah.
Interesting, great observations. And just to touch upon all the successes that you talked about that you have got in the recent past. Now we learn as much from the failures as we learn from the successes. Was there anything recently or in the slightly more distant past where something that you were very excited about, but that did not work out? So essentially, were there any learnings from any failure that you had, and how did you overcome that disappointment of being excited but it not delivering to the level that you were expecting it? Are there any experiences that you guys have to share on that?
I mean, I wouldn't call it essentially a failure that transformed into a success. I would rather take it in a way that, again, when the pandemic hit, when we got the news of the moratorium, which which came as a major challenge back then. So one thing we, to an extent proactively realized and acted upon, but then also reacted on top of it, was to use our social media channels really well. So most of our SMO primarily has been, targeting performance, or, targeting users to be onboarded or give information about our offerings to the users. But during the course of the pandemic, we used social media more as a service channel than a than a communication channel, right? So essentially, the idea was to kind of reassure the users about what's happening, and there were a lot of queries, there were a lot of questions that were being posed on social media, both via private channels as well as on public posts. But the idea for us was to use that channel very differently over the last 6 months versus how we have used that channel in the past. So that was one change, or one alteration that we did in our social media strategy, and it helped to a large extent. I mean, we were able to maintain a lot of positive sentiment about ourselves across across the months, and even there was a lot of the consumers were largely able to reach us, which meant that it helped in our retention and re-engagement metrics. So it essentially helped. But yes, the idea was to be a little proactive and see what how the channels work best at the current moment.
No, that's a great point, Ishan. And I think what's also happening is you interacting with your users on social media is also giving a personalized feeling to the users, the brand that they resonate with. And we are seeing a lot of brands do that on the social media. Rajesh, how about you? Anything that you changed in the recent past from a brand perception standpoint?
From the brand perception, I would like, the couple of things that we kind of, we've started doing like differently, I would say, like, is obviously the first things again, obviously the consumer, the complaints and the how it has become very important these days to listen what consumer has to say, right? So that's been a very critical for us, and we have been actually working on this like for last like 1.5 years, right? Building system, how do we kind of start providing a quick resolution to all the consumers, because we our order volume is very huge, right? And similarly, when you have a larger volume, then obviously the complaints also become a very important part, and it's very critical to kind of address all the issues and resolve in a timely manner. So that's been a very critical a challenge for us, and we have been working, I think, but yeah, during this COVID, we have been able to kind of resolve and find solution for some of the issues that consumers used to face, like delays in terms of refund, right? There were a lot of complaints on social media, right, everywhere, I would say, like but yeah, I think those things we have we worked a lot during this COVID, and I think, and the result is very much pretty much visible these days, and we have kind of we have been able to reduce kind of the complaints, and so it's like it has. So I would like, the takeaway I would say is it's very important for a brand to actually listen what consumer has to say and act upon it quickly. That's a very critical part, right? And yeah, I think that's all.
How about you, Ankit?
So being on the B2B space, right? So it all depends on the partners, right? So for us, it's what you guys are in some form, right? So one of the things that I've been a little bullish about, right, and I keep chasing it, right, till the ecosystem changes, is programmatic buying on the user acquisition space, right? So getting away, not away completely on the affiliate world, but how do we get on a DSP zone and get user acquisition on biddable platforms, right? So that is, as we expected something in 2020, it is getting started with around 15-20%, right? Which unfortunately didn't happen, right? But I'm very sure, right? We started seeing, and we all know, right? The US is pretty much now on the non-affiliate world. Very soon, we have started the early waves coming from Southeast Asia as well, right? And very soon it's gonna become on in India market as well, right? And yes, I think it's we all partners have to work together to make it work in some form, right? So it requires a lot of some clarity of thought from all the partners, right, to make it work, right? So yeah, that's one thing that which didn't succeed in 2020, but yeah, we'll see how this happens.
Ankit, there is a question for you in the chat section, which talks about, are you referring to remarketing trends when you mention 1P, 2P data?
You're absolutely. What I mean is, let's take an example, right? So maybe what I mean over here is coupling the data with some kind of 3P data or 2P data, where we get more about the audiences, right? Beyond what you know about your audiences, right? So let's take an example that I'm an Amazon user. Amazon knows only about what I do inside Amazon, right? and maybe on Amazon I buy only low value stuff, low value items or low value products, right? But outside Amazon, maybe I'm a very heavy shopper in Myntra, right? And traditionally, if Amazon knows about this, he could have targeted me within fashion product or fashion category, right? Which doesn't know, right? And that's where the new wave is using a DMPs and using different kind of audiences. Just like InMobi, we have InMobi audiences. So what we can do is you can couple your first party data using InMobi audiences and get more enrichment outside your ecosystem, right? So basically, these are a set of users go beyond that. Hey, are they high skill apartment users? Are they college university users? Are they do fly frequently? Are they international traveler? Beyond the data metrics that is pin code and what are the data that this is the new wave that we are seeing, right? And the new wave of personalization, right? By just not limiting the first party data.
Sure. Hope this answers your question, Shiva. I have another question which comes from Bhavya, and she asks, when it comes to marketing spends pre-COVID versus post-COVID, what is the trend that you guys are seeing? Do you feel that the cost of acquisition will increase since everyone is moving to digital channels?
Yeah, so I think we were just discussing this prior to the actual the webinar that started. So essentially, it's very interesting for us, right? So what we all thought was that after COVID, all the brands would be a little slow and steady because on the consumer side, the demand would be slightly low and people would not be spending as much, especially on discretionary purchases, right? So the idea we had was that the cost per impression, install, registration, they would be slightly on the lower side, at least till the end of the financial year before we kind of start seeing an uptick. But what we've realized is that the cost of acquisition is on an all-time high. So the brands are bidding crazy, and we saw. I mean, yesterday we were seeing a data that the cost of acquisition last year versus this year is almost 60% higher on on the impression or on the install side. This is across industries, and for fintech it has gone even more, right? Which initially was a little counterintuitive, but then when we thought deeper on it, we were able to understand that okay, there are certain market factors that have helped the overall acquisition getting a little more expensive. So yeah, I mean it's generally what we see at the end of fintech sector is that it's definitely gotten more expensive than earlier.
Rajesh, Ankit, anything that you want to add on that answer?
Again, it depends on, I would say it depends on category to category, right? In some cases, we have seen eCPMs have gone up. At the same time, the CVRs have also gone up, right? So effective CPX, CPI, CTR, everything is still in nominal range, right? But again, it depends on industry. Some kind of niche verticals, we have seen the eCPIs, eCPMs going really, really high. But for shopping as a category, right, we have seen this pretty much remains same. Of not, I would say, when I mean remains same is before the COVID time, right? What is Q1 is what we saw is pretty much on similar lines, right? So I would say it again depends on category to category.
Got it. We have another question for Ishan and Rajesh, which is, how important, in your opinion, is ASO for growth, and how effective is it, given that we get limited data for inference?
So I feel that ASO is obviously it's very important reason because of it, again again in the food category Play Store, in the Google Play Store, again all that optimization that you see, ultimately all the brands that we work on, how we always keep on thinking and idea is how do we increase our organic share, right? So obviously because we can push the acquisition on through paid to a certain point, but after that we also have to think about how do we increase and grow organically. So that's when I feel ASO plays a very important role. And yeah, I think so depending on the category to category, obviously it's a different, but yeah, there are certain categories. And so like for us, like we obviously our pizza is obviously one prime keyword for us, but again we also keep working how do we kind of rank higher on some other keywords like food, restaurant, all of that, right? So and we keep working on that. And then yes, I think that's all. And for all the brands, I would say like similarly it is important for all the brands to actually to do ASO to grow organically. Yeah.
Right. I think to add to that, I think fair points raised by Rajesh. See, one thing is that if you are an app-only platform and if you're a mobile platform today, so I believe ASO largely plays. I mean, if purely from a performance side, I'm speaking, ASO plays a much larger role compared to your SEO. So that's something we all have to appreciate, because the gap between your brand recognition and acquisition is much lesser, both with respect to the time as well as with respect to the number of steps the user has to go through. With respect to the metrics, see, essentially there are quite a few metrics that define your ASO. So one being your, I mean, of course, it starts with the metrics that you directly control, like the number of downloads, the number of reviews, the rating of your app. So rating exactly is not controlled directly by you, but of course, you can definitely try and get a better rating, because those things really play a lot of role. Then how well you respond to the ratings, right? So essentially, if you are not responding to your ratings, then Google Play would assume your app to be a dead app. So you have to respond to your ratings very, very diligently. The descriptions that you put up, the overall, all those things definitely play a good role from an input KPI standpoint. One more thing we have to understand is that ASO is 40% marketing and 60% product. So when I say 60% product, so essentially it does not just depend on how many inorganic downloads you're pushing through, and which is in effect pushing your app up on the organic listing, whether on the, I mean, for us it's the trending finance category, or for the respective keywords pertinent to our category. But also for that particular keyword, if somebody installed your app, how longer did they retain the app on the Play Store? So let's say if 9 out of 10 people who are organically downloading KreditBee by the keyword of instant personal loan, and out of those 9 people, let's say 7 of them are uninstalling within 30 minutes, right? So essentially what it tells Google is that anybody who is downloading the app with instant personal loan keyword with KreditBee as the download app is not retaining the app, which means this is not the best app. Right. Or let's say there are a lot of crashes, a lot of ANRs on your app, right? ANR is app not responding. So there are a lot of those metrics in the backend that you can track on the Google Play console. So essentially, if the app performance is good, if the retention of the product is well on your consumer's platform, then you would see a lot better ASO than just focusing on the pure play marketing metrics like your download count and rating.
Great. Thanks, Ishan. Thanks, Rajesh, for answering that question. We have time for one more question, so I'll probably cover that. Satya Sharma has asked that, where do you guys see the future of CPI? Do you feel it's contracting at a much faster rate?
So probably let Ankit answer that first from the.
I would say it all depends on channel, right? So it all depends on channel. So what channel that you want, right? So it's basically an API supply, SDK supply, programmatic, DSPs, biddable, ONOs, OEM supply, right? So again, it depends on channel to channel, right? But yes, the moment of truth is at the end of the day, the focus will be more on the loyal users, which is the high LTV users, right? And wherever the channel gets, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not about just eCPIs. It's an eCPX in some form, right? And X should not be only calculated by first purchase or first only one transaction. It's also looked at the lifetime value of that particular user, right? So again, it depends on how you frame things, change your tables, depending on the metrics that you look at is where it will change.
Got it. Thanks, Ankit. We are in the final 2 minutes. We can probably take one more question then. So Manav asks that, how effective is SMS marketing when it comes to retention? Any one of you can answer that.
I'll take that up maybe. So SMS marketing for retention, frankly speaking, so far for us, like in Domino's, has not been very much effective so far, right? So we use SMS channel, to kind of reach out to obviously the non-digital users, especially customers who have ordered from dine-in channels and never came up on digital platforms. So those are the kind of key target consumers for us through SMS channel. But yeah, the response that we have seen from the SMS channel is not very encouraging, and that's been a reason that we have not actually scaled this channel so far. And we use this as a marketing channel, obviously, but yes, we to a very limited extent, and very, very targeted consumers that we look at to kind of use this channel to target. So yes, I think that's all. But yeah, I think, but again, I think it's again, category to category, it is very much different.
Got it. All right, we are on time, guys. Thank you so much, Ishan. Thank you so much, Ankit. Thank you so much, Rajesh, for joining us today. I do have one last announcement. Priyanka, would you want to keep the screen up for the mobile growth events? So, Branch is hosting its first mobile growth events where we will be recognizing leaders and evangelists during the who are driving the growth on mobile. And we will be announcing the award winners, and the agenda will be packed with speakers from leading brands and networking opportunities. So look out for that communication from Branch. And thank you so much to everybody in the audience who joined today, and to all the speakers who, came here and not just shared the strategic insights, but also talked about the tactical aspects on all things marketing. Really appreciate your time, Ankit, Rajesh, and Ishan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
everyone.
Thank you, Nimesh.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks everyone.